Hello and welcome to Scientists for Open Science, PLOS's ongoing campaign that brings researchers and stakeholders from around the world to share perspectives on open science and open research. My name is Dan Morgan. I'm the Director of Communications and Community Relations here at PLOS. I'm joined today by Kyobutungi, Madhukar, and Julia Robinson to have a conversation about the importance of DEI considerations in open science by learnings and insight from their field of global health. So I'll invite you all to briefly introduce yourselves, and starting with you, Catherine.
Hi, so I'm Catherine Kyobutungi, and I'm the Executive Director of the African Population and Health Research Center in Nairobi, Kenya. And I'm an epidemiologist, and more recently, I think I'm an equity advocate or activist, but also one of the co-editors-in-chief of PLOS Global Public Health.
Wonderful, thank you. Over to you, Madhu.
Hi, my name is Madhukar. I'm a physician originally from India, where I did my medical and public health training. And then I went on to do epidemiology. Now I'm a professor of epidemiology and global health at McGill University in Canada. I do most of my research in India on tuberculosis. And I'm really happy to team up with Catherine as a joint editor-in-chief of PLOS GPH.
Wonderful. And you, Julia.
Hi, I'm Julia Robinson. I am the executive editor of PLOS Global Public Health. I've had a long career doing global public health work, primarily in West Africa, although in other locations as well. And I'm also active in global health advocacy. So that's me.
Wonderful. Well, thank you and welcome, and thank you for your time for having this conversation with me. Okay, I'll start. So important diversity, equity, and inclusion considerations, I would say, are finally entering the conversation and mainstream vocabulary around open science. I noted that the recent draft of UNESCO's recommendation on open science has very clear language about how there cannot be a truly open science until all scientists and researchers are included in science. So through your respective global public health lenses, how would you describe the problem, the history of the issue, where we are now, and where we still need to go? Catherine, we could start with you.
So I think it's a long story, and I think it's a story that is historical, and it's a story of a system that is entrenched and has been going on for many, many years. And so in a way, it demonstrates how difficult it is to dismantle the system by virtue of the fact that it's something which has been going on for quite some time. So I think global public health practice mirrors the same unequal power structures that are at play in society in general. And much as it has precursors, I think the precursors of global public health, whether it's community health, whether it's public health without the global, all have one thing in common. And that thing in common is the power differentials between the people who have the problems and those who have the purported solutions. And in practice on the ground, it's driven by, I would say, paternalistic attitudes, where powerless people, quote unquote, and communities are the subject of interventions and are consumers of solutions by people that know better, whether those people are from within the countries or whether those people are outside the countries. But then as one moves higher, from the local level in the global governance architecture, then the practice is increasingly driven by saviorism, supremacy, and coloniality. And of course, these are, as I said, they're a result of history, because what you know as public health grew out of necessity to protect people who are going into other countries, either as colonialists or as colonial armies, or later as armies to fight wars outside their own countries. So there was necessity to protect them from illnesses and diseases that were encountered in different environments. And so in the end, public health sort of ended up entrenching a system that was aimed at protecting people who are not indigenous to the areas and communities where they were operating. And as a result, erased indigenous knowledge systems. So health and public health, I think, has henceforth been defined from that perspective, the perspective of individuals, countries that went into other communities and sort of imposed their worldview or their system of how they understood health and public health. So, practice and practitioners are therefore a product of an entrenched system. And I think over time, there's been a failure to interrogate and I would say address the historical origins of global public health. So what we have are practitioners who are doing things that in a way perpetuate those power inequities, perhaps inadvertently or perhaps by design, because even when colonialism ended, coloniality has not. And the current events, for instance, when you look at the current situation in terms of vaccine inequity for the COVID pandemic, it demonstrates exactly what's wrong with global public health practice. But it's also a good example of what has been going on for years and years, but has been hidden from the glare of the public view. The global community is all paying attention to what's going on. But it's an example of where there's a big problem, but then solutions are designed in one part of the world, but solutions are made not necessarily to solve the problem decisively, but other interests sort of take precedence. When you see the whole vaccine inequity situation and where, for instance, there's such things going on in some countries, almost the whole adult population has been vaccinated. We're talking about boosters, and when in another part of the world, hardly any vaccination has taken place. So that is really what has been going on. But fundamental to that is solutions which are designed not to decisively address the problem, and solutions which are designed not so much to take into account the voices of the potential beneficiaries of those solutions, but they are pre-cooked. So this is what it is. I'm from Uganda, I live in Kenya. So my experience would be that I will take whichever vaccine the global system has brought into the country of Kenya, whether it is my preference, whether it's not my preference. I'll take it when the global system decides which vaccine, when to get it, at what cost. So I think these current events really are a good demonstration of what's wrong and what's broken in the global public health practice. Where we still need to go, I think the last year, as partly as a result of the pandemic, but also part of as a result of other movements, I think we're chipping out the system and we'll keep chipping away. So where we still need to go is to continue chipping out the system and hope that the system topples over and collapses and gets dismantled. But if not, I think at some point we have to decide whether to do more than chipping away at the system. Over.
Thank you. Thank you, Madhu. What would you add to that?
I fully agree with what Catherine has been saying. I think it may be worth asking a few questions. Like, for example, who can access science today? And when I was, a young medical student in India or a resident in India, I remember clearly how difficult it was to get the latest paper in Lancet or Science or Nature. It was a huge struggle to read literature, in many countries. And this was India. You can go to many other parts of the world where it's even worse, where you basically have no libraries, no access, no ability to pay the subscription fees that many journals charge. So even our ability to read the science is not an equal playing field, right? If I can't even read science, how will I do good science? If I can't read science, how will I cite good science? How will I publish good science? So that's why I think open access is fundamental for science. It's at the very core of what science is or should be. Nobody in the world should be locked away behind paywalls. All science should be accessible to people. Right now in this pandemic, many journals have made their COVID content free, right? And I'm terrified of going back to the old normal where everything will go back behind a paywall. That to me is tragic. And why only COVID? I work on TB. TB is a disease of poverty. I don't want TB content to be paywalled. I want that to be available to people. And this has been a huge challenge, I think in general. So in terms of who can access and read science, this is a far from an even world. We live in a very inequitable society in terms of who can read science. Who can produce science? Like I said, if I don't have the funding, if I don't have infrastructure, resources, ability to fund science and do research is highly limited. And then on top of it, if I have to pay $5,000 for an article processing charge or a fee, I'm pretty much locked out of this field. And that's why if you look at major international journals, the content seriously lacks diversity. It's mostly high-income country authors who are publishing again and again in the same set of journals. And it's basically like a clique that nobody can really crack into, right? I certainly couldn't have dreamt of publishing in Lancet or PLOS Medicine if I were living or working in India, right? And Catherine is facing that challenge right now. But obviously things are very different for me sitting here in Canada because I have the resources, I have infrastructure. I can now publish in the same journals that I could not have done if I had been living in India. So why this duality? Science is science, right? We should all have a shot at publishing in quality journals. And then who edits science? I think Catherine and I, as people of color, would be not the norm in major international journals. Certainly, how many Catherines would you find as editors-in-chief? We've done the research, we published it. If you look at global health journals, the editors are mostly men, mostly white folks, mostly based in the global north. And that mirrors every aspect of global health, by the way. It's not just journals. It's not just editorial board membership. Every aspect of science and global health is dominated by men, dominated by folks in the global north who have all the resources, and they become gatekeepers of what is worthy of publication and what is not worthy of publication. And that becomes a huge problem, I think, in terms of it skews the science towards what the global north sees as being important, right? For example, if COVID mostly affected the global south next year, I think all journals won't publish COVID stuff anymore because they don't see it as their problem. Right now, every journal is publishing it because it's impacting Americans, it's impacting Canadians, it's impacting Europeans, but it may not be the case a few years from now if the pandemic becomes concentrated in the global south. And lastly, who benefits from science is a very important question. And there is no better case study than COVID vaccinations to illustrate it, exactly what Catherine said. 3.5 billion people are waiting for their first dose of a COVID vaccine. With the Delta variant ripping through communities, 15 million people are estimated to have died already in this pandemic. So we can produce the best mRNA vaccine in the world, and we can talk about how beautiful science delivered results within 1 year and whatnot. But if it is not reaching people, of what value is that science, right? How has it really helped us? These are hard questions that we should be asking.
Thank you so much. Julia.
Yeah, I think that the two answers that have already been given pretty much sum up, I think, the importance of open science. I think one thing I was thinking about, particularly as Madhu was speaking, is thinking about science also as a public good. Most of the research that's been done, especially around COVID, but most of the global health research done, period, is funded by governments, and governments are funded by people. And so to be able to lock that science away when the community writ large supported its production is deeply unfair. I think also one of the things that, in this new space with PLOS Global Public Health, we've really tried to both articulate the barriers of access to science, both its production and being able to read the results, and really trying intentionally to chip away at each of those barriers until we can hopefully make it non-existent anymore. So I think that those are the two maybe elements that I just wanted to add to this, this discussion about open science and its importance in this field.
Here we're mentioning like PLOS Global Public Health already, and Madhu, definitely taking your words that the responsibility that a lot of publishers need to take about how, by designing kind of publications and scholarly communication systems, you actually have an effect on the type of research and how it is done globally. And it's a responsibility, I think, that a lot of publishers don't actually assume on themselves, where they do have it. But, with PLOS Global Health, obviously you guys are going about this completely differently. I would love to hear more about kind of what you're going for, what you're already achieving, and kind of some of the feedback you're already getting. Catherine, it'd be great to go back to you.
Maybe one thing I think I'll say before talking about the successes is that the system can't correct itself, and there has to be an element of intentionality, by all players in global public health to, right whatever it is that is out of balance. And so our experience actually demonstrates that we launched this journal on social media, and the response was overwhelming, nothing like I've ever dreamt of, expected. And just in a way demonstrating the need for this kind of journal where people finally feel like, oh my God, my voice can be heard. I can publish in a reputable journal, I can publish in a good journal, I can publish something that I think is important. But then it was upfront that we are going to be concerned about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So the response was overwhelming. I think that's one way of describing it. But then there was an invitation for people to submit and become members of the editorial board, and using the online submission system. And the first submissions were completely skewed as what you'd expect, because who gets to know that who is on Twitter, who is tweeting, and who gets to know that this journal has been launched, who got an email notification in their inboxes. I got people from different parts of the world saying, hey, I saw this, congratulations. And most of them are not from Africa. They're not people that are in my part of the world. So who gets to know that a journal has been launched? Who gets to know they can apply as an editor? Who thinks they actually qualify and would be entertained as editors? So the initial submission was dominated, by the same demographics that Madhu talked about. People mostly from the global south, mostly men, mostly white. So it's the same thing. Like, if there's no intentionality about trying to right the inequity that exists, then you'll end up with, sort of perpetuating the same system. So what we did was to do something different and complement the online submission system. And I think, as you've heard at the beginning, we have such a diverse, group of section editors. I was in the section editors, the first Zoom call, and it's refreshing sitting in a meeting, and there are people from so many parts of the world, and you don't feel like you're like intruding into some, space that you're not supposed to be into, because sometimes that happens where you're somewhere and you're the only person who looks different from everyone else who's in the room. But this time it was like, okay, there are so many different people from different parts of the world. And I have a conviction that the knowledge and intellect is not a monopoly of certain people. So I'm excited about the new ideas, the diverse ideas, the amazing expertise we are going to benefit from by what we've tried to do. So other than the public, sort of overwhelming welcome and support for the journal, I think also seeing the success in putting together an extremely diverse editorial board has been very rewarding.
Fantastic. How has it felt for you, Madhu?
Yeah, I mean, this has been quite an interesting journey since PLOS first reached out to Catherine and me to lead this journal. I think I like to first acknowledge that building a new journal and building diversity and equity and inclusion into it from the start is the right thing to do, because it's very hard if you're an established journal to make that change. It's not that other journals are not trying, right? Every journal now, major journal now, is putting out diversity and inclusion pledges, right? For example, Lancet journals made a pledge to have gender balance in their editorial boards, right? So I'm happy to see all of that happening. But, I won't mention the journal, but there is a famous journal that, put out a diversity and inclusion statement, but then turned around and announced a 9,500 euro article processing charge, right? How do you reconcile the two? It boggles my mind that it is even possible to reconcile the two. In my opinion, you just cannot. If you believe in equity, and if you charge, $10,000 plus, you're basically ruling out half the world's population from your journal. So you cannot, in any fair world, reconcile the two, right? It's like saying, we want you to come to our conference, but the conference fee is $10,000. So who attends the conference? Mostly people in the global north who have the resources, right? So to me, I'm stunned that journals are not able to see that they themselves cannot deliver on their diversity and inclusion pledge with their ridiculous publishing models, right? The model itself is not equitable So there is no way on earth you're going to shake up the system. Sure, you can have someone from Africa on the editorial board, or you can add more women, but fundamentally, you are not shaking the foundations. To me, equity starts by saying, no matter where you are living, you have a shot at publishing in our journal if your work is good. That, if you cannot promise that, then I don't think you can deliver on any other aspect of your DEI pledge. So to me, that has been the biggest refreshing part about working with this journal with Julia and Catherine. The fact that PLOS backed our vision to build equity into the model, the fact that nobody is turned away from our journal because they cannot pay, to me and Catherine, it was the single biggest game changer in terms of our comfort level of taking this on. Otherwise, imagine how we would look if we said we believed in equity in global health, and then we say, oh no, you can't really publish with us because you're from, Rwanda and you can't pay a fee. We can't live with ourselves with that kind of rubbish, right? So to us, it starts there. Secondly, we discovered, as Catherine said, when you make an open call to join an editorial board, lo and behold, it's mostly men, it's mostly folks from the global north, right, who'd rush in and want to be part of this. We had to work extraordinarily hard to swing the pendulum in the opposite direction. In other words, if you're not intentional, if you just allow things to move in its usual processes, it will invariably skew towards where it's always gone, where the power always has rested. So for us, after 3-4 months of hard work, we were thrilled that we have 43 section editors, of whom 70+% are women, well over 90% are Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and half are colleagues from the global South. Now that is a magic miracle that I have never seen in any international journal. And I will again tell you that this was intentional and deliberate. It is not an accident. It is never an accident. In fact, it would never happen otherwise. We had to consciously swing it in the opposite direction of where everybody else is to be able to bring some sensible parity in our field of global health, because we already knew how unequal or inequitable it is normally. We've done the research, we know the numbers, so we had to swing it in the opposite direction. We have section editors from 23 countries, we have academic editors from 53 countries, and we've received 600+ submissions in the first 3 months from 60+ countries. This to me is how you demonstrate that you really do believe in equity, diversity, and inclusion. Anything else is just talk, in my opinion. And just putting a few people of color on the editorial board, to me, is not living up to what it truly means. And in short, talk is cheap. Right now, I genuinely believe that most international journals are at the talk stage. They're not enacting it. To me, I want to see in hard numbers, what have you achieved? What's your diversity of authorship? What's your diversity of your editorial board? And how much money do people have to pay to get into your journal? If you tell me it's $5,000, $10,000, I will tell you straight off the bat that you don't understand the first thing about equity, because you just don't. I know what it means, having lived and based in India. Catherine knows that $5,000 is probably 1 year's salary for one of her researchers in her institute. It is incompatible with the equity. So I cannot live with any journal that claims to put out pledge and then has this ridiculous numbers that they can't justify.
Anything you want to add to that, Julia?
I think just 2 quick points. One is that, echoing what Catherine said before about the response being overwhelming. We have received so many testimonials from both researchers and academic editors and section editors saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe that this exists. This is something that we have been craving forever. No space like this exists. I can't look at any other board and see someone who looks like me in it. And I will never forget, because at one point we were celebrating, with some of these testimonials, and Madhu just said, this is how it's supposed to be. This shouldn't be extraordinary, but it is. And I think that is just, it underlines that intentionality, I think, that we are bringing to every step of this process. This isn't happening by accident, and it's not happening without a great deal of work and effort. And often it takes longer, to be able to recruit people who are really representative of the research in the communities that we want to reach out to. It might take longer, but we are up for that task, and we are up for continuing to interrogate, to hear from the community, to make sure that we're living up to our promises. We want to be held accountable, and I think we will be by the community. And I guess the other point I wanted to make is kind of building off of those section editors. These are leaders in the global health community, and they are leaders of our journal. And they will be driving submissions and research and voices with their respective sections. And I think building in elements of DEI from the top down is the only way that you're going to change the landscape. We needed to have editors-in-chief like Catherine and Madhu, and we needed to have these section editors to be able to reach out to the places that we want to reach out to and feature the research and the voices that are the most important right now.
Catherine, you wanted to add something? Go ahead.
Yes. I mean, I think I wanted to add something about the contradiction of, putting out a diversity, equity, inclusion statement and then having these outrageous article processing charges. Because how do you become an academic editor? How do you become a section editor? You have to have a track record. So, Julia knows this. You submit your CV, people look at where have you published, how many papers, and they look at that. So you put this out and then you keep people out. So 10 years from now, no one would have benefited to qualify to be an academic editor. So you're sort of, and that's what I said earlier about this system, which is not intended to solve the fundamental problem. So it's there to sort of scratch the surface and then, give an impression of trying to address the problem. Because you become an academic editor because you've published, but now you're being excluded from publishing from Nature, but then Nature is diverse. So it's that whole system where it is set up to be self-perpetuating, and there's some of the ways in which it self-perpetuates itself.
Yeah.
I want to just add to what Julia said about and Catherine said about the reception. You should see some of the emails that we get. So some of them like, are you sure this email is meant for us? Because they never thought they would belong or get invited, right? It's like, oh my God, this is like the biggest day of my life to be invited to be on the board of an international journal. Some of them said, we thought your email was spam. It could not have been for us. So to me, it's like sad in some ways, because like I said, if every international journal was reflective of the world we're living in and it was diverse, then we would not look different, or we should not look different, right? To me, that has been one, I'm like, oh my God, this is literally life-changing for some people to hear them talk about their experiences of being invited. And, I don't think it should be like this. I think I basically want to see all major science journals wake up and realize that we live in a very diverse world. And if they're not reflective of the world, they're not going to produce science that's reflective of people for whom it's intended, nor will it benefit people for whom it's intended.
I just want to thank you for these remarks. I mean, I have so many things that I want to react to, yet I want to listen to you guys more, but I'll just say two things. And I mean, thank you for bringing up that notion of modeling and infrastructure, because you just can't have equity without the infrastructure to support it. And we actually have a whole other session being released today with it as devoted to that topic. Sarah Ruhi is going to be talking about the global equity model and the community action publishing business models that we're developing to kind of do exactly this at PLOS. And then second of all, I want to thank all three of you for allowing someone like me, who has to deal with a lot of general messaging and social media inquiries. So you can imagine how many times I've gotten the response, but surely we don't need any new journals, right? And I'm able to say, well, who's the we here? Who are you speaking for? And then I just link to the tweets. I link to the section editors and senior editors, talking about everything that you've talked about. And I can really kind of showcase that, well, you're so used to kind of commenting on what it is that scholarly communications does or doesn't need, that here's an example for you where you actually aren't necessarily the community that only gets to comment on what we do in this space. So
I'll also share another interesting anecdote. Months ago, when we were even thinking about this journal, I had put out a Twitter thread saying, if you wanted to see a dream global health journal, what would it look like, right? I had said it'll be half men, half women, it'll be half global north, half global south, it'll be affordable, so on and so forth, you know, and then people from all over the world were reacting to my thread saying, yeah, I'd like to see this, I'd like to see that. Just this week or last week, somebody found that old tweet and they retweeted it saying, Madhu, Julia, and Catherine have actually created this journal, and that's PLOS GP. I'm like, yes, we actually have. In fact, we've done better in some ways than I had thought, right? So to me, that is exactly where, that's the intentionality. And I think it's still not done, right? We're just at the start. We're yet to launch our first issue. But I think if the journal can continue to be diverse in terms of its authorship. Readership, I'm not too worried. That's the beauty of PLOS, right? We know for sure everything is gold open access. Nobody in the world needs to struggle to read a PLOS journal, but the authorship, the editorship, and I think Catherine and I and Julia are really hoping that this ridiculously impressive board we have, they will basically carry the journal forward, regardless of whether we are around or not around. Certainly I don't see myself continuously doing this for a while, but we have such an impressive bench strength, right? That's what you want to see, that they'll step up. In fact, some of our section editors are ridiculously good and they're so excited, and they want to do way more than we thought they would, right? I'm on many editorial boards and I've not received a single email from them in like 3 years, nor have I been asked to be on a Zoom call, nor have I been asked or consulted on the journal vision or its future or its direction. I have really not been consulted. My name is on the masthead, but that's about it, right? The journal has made no efforts to tap into me or use me, which is the opposite of what we are seeing. We are seeing so much excitement and engagement. Several of our editors have already blogged for us and want to write pieces for us. To me, that is where the future lies. So regardless of what happens, I'm confident that the diversity of the people we have around us, we basically fill the room with some ridiculously talented people from around the world. Now, the fate of the journal then, I think, rests with them rather than me or Catherine or Julia, because there's only so much 2 or 3 people can do.
Absolutely. I mean, so again, returning to my thanks to you. Thank you for making this the easiest journal so far in my career to promote and talk about, both in messaging and on social media, etc., because it is just phenomenally easy for me to do my job when I have.
But I do also want to make one more very, very important point. And the point is, imagine if the editors-in-chief and the executive editor, that we were 3 white men based in the US or UK or wherever. I promise you, no matter how good they are, how well-intentioned they are, generous or kind they are, that this journal would never head towards where we are taking this. And to me, that's why if the leadership is not diverse, I don't care how wonderful your intent is, your ability to deliver on diversity and inclusion is limited, because as they talk about, it kind of blinds you, right? They see the world as a reflection of themselves, and they can't even understand that there is a whole world out there where it's a totally different demographic, women, people of color, people who are oppressed. They will never, ever understand what those people are living and going through. So they won't understand why 9,500 euros is beyond stupid, right? Because they can write a check for 9,500 tomorrow morning and not blink. So they think the whole world can pay $9,500, right? That is the blindness that you have when you are sitting in a room. It's like, a panel of men talking about women's reproductive rights or whatever, right? That kind of rubbish goes on in this world. How, right? How do men know what women go through, right? So why can't we do this from the leadership stage, which again, I think is kudos to PLOS, because if the leadership is not right, you can never live up to the rest of your EDI pledge.
Thank you. I mean, the systemic issues in play, as one of the other things that you all three said that struck me is that this notion of like why you need to do something new rather than just change a journal. Like why someone could say, oh, we have journal X, why don't we put in new leadership? Why don't we diversify the board? Why don't we kind of fix it from within? I've yet to see that work. I mean, journals are some of the most systemic things that I've ever encountered. I've spent 20 years running journals. It's hard enough to kind of add a new thread of research to a journal or a new article submission type to a journal, let alone change the systemic issues around inclusion. So I'm struck by your comments and find myself completely agreeing with them that there's chipping away, but then there's also sometimes you just have to delete and start again. And I do see that happening with PLOS Global Public Health. Well, thank you so much for your comments. I mean, this has been such a lovely conversation. I hesitate to draw it to a close because we've scratched the surface of some of the things that we want to talk about. So all I hope is that we get to continue these kinds of conversations. Maybe we could do it on a regular basis. I note, as you said, that there's been a lot of blogging and kind of writing in the popular press, like from you guys and on our blogger property at PLOS, etc. So a lot of these kinds of extra conversations beyond just the research that's going to get published in the journal are already happening. So I definitely welcome and encourage anybody who has thoughts about this kind of thing to submit to the PLOS blogs, and so we can kind of review those and hear from everybody around the world on this topic. But I mean, thank you so much. I've been ending all of these recorded conversations with, are we hopeful for the future, right? I talking to you, I mean, you said it, Madhu, is that on the one hand, I'm sad that this has to be a conversation because this is how I think everything should be. But on the other hand, I wasn't having this conversation last year, and now we are. So I think in the end, I'm hopeful, but I'll just end with that. Like, give me some comments as to how hopeful you are and what's kind of on your plate tomorrow to keep being hopeful. Catherine.
I don't think we have an option other than to be hopeful, because if we're not hopeful, the world is such a terrible place. We'll just go home and sleep and never get out of bed. So I think it's hope that keeps us, personally, I think it's hope that keeps me going, because at some point you realize there's a difficult world out there, and perhaps I had not seen myself as playing a role in trying to solve some problems in this difficult world. And then maybe you find some people are waiting for you to solve the problems, or maybe no one is waiting for you, but you're also waiting for others. So there's something that says we are the ones we've been waiting for. And so I've been waiting for myself, and here I am. And so hope keeps us going. And I don't know, maybe 20 years from now, we look back and say, yes, something we did actually manage to dismantle the system, or maybe we didn't succeed, but we achieved something. So I'm hopeful about maybe the limited aims of what we can achieve, showing an example and a model of how diversity, equity, and inclusion can be incorporated into the whole, sort of soul and spirit of a journal from that perspective. But of course, this is not the only thing we do. And I think the global health, the global knowledge system is part of a bigger system, and it contributes to the bigger system. So if we're able to achieve something with a journal, then I'm hopeful that some other aspects of global health practice, which go beyond the knowledge production, will also change.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Madhu.
So I think in the world of global health, we have become a case study now already. I think everybody is looking at us very closely. And it does put pressure on Julia, Catherine, and I to deliver, because talk is cheap, right? Acting is very difficult. Where I'm hopeful is what I had said before. We have brought in successfully ridiculously talented, thoughtful people from around the world. To me, they will be the ones who will decide how this case study is going to move forward, right? So I feel in some ways liberated now. I don't feel like the world's weight is on 3 shoulders. It's on many people's shoulders. And whether we sink or swim, it will be a collective effort. So to that extent, I'm very happy. Where I'm also very hopeful is young people. young people in global health, as Catherine and Julia will tell you, are constantly trolling us on social media, wanting a role, right? How can we contribute? You know, some of them want to be editors, for Christ's sake, and they haven't even finished grad school yet. So we cannot tell them that it takes time to become an editor, but you can contribute, right? You can review, you can write blog posts for us. In fact, we're about to publish our first piece authored by several students. So we want to give them a space so that they see this diverse, inclusive journal as their future home, right? To future home as editors, as leaders in the space of global health. To me, I think the world desperately needs more young people to show up, because I'm worried that adults are failing us. Whether it's climate change or whether it's COVID vaccine inequity, adults have displayed, unbridled selfishness and greed. I think young people are seeing the world with so much clarity. I think giving them an opportunity to take the reins as we go forward would be a great way to be more optimistic, I think.
Thank you. Julia?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like Catherine said, there's only one choice, and that's to be hopeful. And I think that we get a lot of energy from this community who, like we had mentioned, had this overwhelming response and continue to. I think that that's one of the things that's been really personally fulfilling, I suppose, is being able to see the sustained support for this journal. It's one thing when you make an announcement and you have, a really lofty vision and an ambitious vision. And then I think people have been seeing us living up to what we said we were going to do. And once we start publishing papers, they're going to see that again. And it is a great responsibility that we have. I feel it in every day that we're working to build this journal, but it's also a great honor. I think that we take it very, very seriously, what we're trying to do, and recognize it's a much bigger project than just PLOS Global Public Health. But I think at the same time, we're able to have a good deal of fun doing it. So, I mean, being able to connect with these communities, to be able to see kind of the impact and the inspiration that we're able to either share or provide or build this model with this great vision. So I am hopeful. I think that we're going to do some pretty great things in the near future, and I'm really excited to see where we get to.
Again, thank you so much, all three of you, for joining me in this conversation. For everybody watching, listening, and hopefully taking notes, thank you again for watching. Anything that we've referred to that we can link to, we'll have in the comments of this video below. So don't hesitate to check out all of those resources and blog posts that we'll put in there. But this is the end. Thank you very, very much indeed.